Under the dim yellow lights of the office, every small movement seemed to slow and sharpen, as if time itself wanted to prolong Eva's irremediable moment of failure. In a world where every piece of paper could spark a covert war, the slightest negligence could turn a diligent employee into a scapegoat. The absence of what seemed to be a simple procedure, the clinic's certificate renewal, had delivered Eva a bitter sentence, erasing all her efforts in the eyes of her colleagues, especially Ted, who was always strict yet full of expectations for those around him. Just one minor mistake, and the entire rhythm of office life faltered. Eva sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the ripples in her small cup of coffee, tasting the bittersweet sting of defeat lingering on her lips, and feeling the chill of accusatory glances from every corner of the room. Yet within that setting, Eva's bitterness was overshadowed by another feeling: suspicion. It wasn't just the regret over her own carelessness, but also a vague warning echoing in her mind. She remembered clearly that it was Kat who had gently told her not to worry about the system's reminder. Just paperwork. Leave it be, nothing urgent. Those words, uttered on a day when Eva was busy and exhausted, had become the spark that ignited today's disaster. Now, each small detail returned like puzzle pieces in a meticulously prepared scheme. Eva tormented herself. Had she placed her trust in the wrong person? Or was she simply too weak under pressure, too gullible to heed a colleague's advice? Someone she once considered a friend? Ted, seasoned by experience, never let emotions override his reason. He called Kat into his office, his eyes calm yet piercing. Kat understood how the clinic operated, and also how people's minds worked. She seized the rare opportunity to cast herself as the victim of someone else's carelessness. Without the slightest tremor, Kat emphasized she had always stressed the importance of legal procedures, had warned Eva to be cautious, and that if any mistakes had happened, it was simply because Eva lacked the clarity and responsibility to fulfill her role. With lips pressed tight and furrowed brows, Kat effectively severed Eva's last hope of salvaging her reputation in Ted's eyes. She even coolly offered to stay behind to help Eva fix her mistake. A proposal that, though seemingly generous, was laced with malice, as if Kat's continued presence was the only thing keeping Eva from being completely cast out. Ted missed nothing in Kat's expression. He asked, calm yet stern, whether Kat had intentionally led Eva into making a mistake, exploiting Eva's inexperience for her own ends. Kat denied it cleverly, half-joking, deftly shifting all responsibility back onto Eva without cracking her professional mask. She played the role of innocent teammate so well that anyone eavesdropping would conclude Kat was always acting for the collective good, never intending harm to the clinic. Kat's cold certainty left Ted, for all his experience, unable to find a single piece of evidence to accuse her. He could only instruct her not to be too harsh with Eva, trying to preserve a fragile peace when everything else was so precarious. When Ted left the office to meet Nicole, the atmosphere between Eva and Kat thickened with a new, icy tension, dense as condensation on winter glass. Eva no longer concealed her thoughts, sought no empathy from Kat, and no longer nursed illusions of a colleague's bond that may have existed only in faded memory. Her anger hardened into a cold, instinctive defense. She saw herself as cornered, made into a target for all blame. Kat remained unfazed, her faint, challenging smile and ambiguous looks driving Eva to the brink with frustration. Yet the truth, or at least a version of it, always drifted between them, never clear enough to convict, never hazy enough to ignore. Outside, afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, making everything shimmer ambiguously, like moral boundaries blurred by calculation, suspicion, and covert power struggles. Eva left the office torn between shame and fury, regret and a growing resolve for revenge. She knew she could not remain a victim, could not let people like Kat keep manipulating everything behind the scenes without challenge. On her way home, Eva let herself drift into memories of her past, of a mad mother she once hated, of a promise never to follow in those footsteps. Yet now, she felt a violent instinct rising inside her, something she had never acknowledged before. She realized the corruption and numbness that betrayal and pain had cultivated in her all this time. Kat was not untouched by her own inner turmoil, even if outwardly she remained the poised woman used to walking the fine line between good and evil. She knew there was no evidence against her, but also that Eva was not someone who would easily forget today's humiliation. The taste of victory mingled with anxiety that one day, Eva herself would turn the tables and expose everything Kat had carefully hidden. This was more than just a workplace power struggle. It was a fight for self-worth amid perfect facades, false masks, and old wounds that had never healed. In the days that followed, the office became a cold battleground of avoided glances, half-hearted conversations, and a web of small plots disguised beneath paperwork and dry reports. Eva no longer naively believed in absolute honesty. She began to scrutinize Kat's every move, memorizing each word and gesture, biding her time to strike back. She quietly gathered scraps of information, trying to piece together a complete picture of the scheme behind her downfall. The deeper she dug, the more she realized everything had been set up with chilling intelligence. No flaws, no trail to follow. Ted grew ever more distant, no longer looking at Eva with trust but with the cold caution of someone once betrayed, even if he knew in his heart things were not so simple. Every evening, Eva returned to her small apartment, sitting quietly under the pale yellow light, replaying every scenario, questioning her conscience, and reminding herself that to survive, she could not simply endure. She could not let herself be shredded by other people's power games. Gradually, her softness hardened into a steely hatred, and she began to change, armoring herself with thorns, refusing to show any vulnerability. She learned to pretend not to care, to smile in the face of veiled attacks, and above all, to think like a predator in a jungle of masks. Elsewhere, Kat maintained her icy, powerful woman persona, acting unconcerned by Eva's changes, but deep inside was an ever-present fear of retaliation. Every move was more calculated, every word chosen with care to avoid mistakes. The silent war continued, growing more intense by the day, each side reminding themselves not to falter. The others around them were merely unwitting spectators, sucked into a vortex of power no one could control. Every decision, every mistake, could be the spark for another attack, another cunning act of vengeance disguised as righteousness. And so, under the clinic's roof, two women, two generations, two fates, one haunted by her mother's past, the other obsessed with victory, continued their duel with the sharpest weapons, without a single word spoken. Silence became their deadliest weapon, trust a cruel joke, and kindness, if it ever existed, was now just a faint memory in a battle with no end in sight. The oppressive atmosphere in the office thickened daily with suspicion and hurt. Each day, the confrontation between Eva and Kat simmered quietly yet fiercely. Every action, every look became a test. Every encounter, a knife tearing at scars that had never healed. But deep inside, neither knew that all this bitterness, hatred, mutual traps, and thirst for dominance were only a veneer hiding a dark secret waiting to be revealed. It was Leslie, with sharp eyes and a lost heart, who had laid the groundwork for all these tragedies, the one who held the answer to all the pain in Eva and Kat's lives. From old diaries, time-stained photos, and a faded birth certificate at the back of a drawer, the truth gradually crept out of the shadows. On that fateful day years ago, Leslie had manipulated the destinies of two children with trembling hands and selfish calculations. A secret swap of identities, carried out in silence, unnoticed by anyone. Every effort Leslie made to keep this secret had been built on a chain of lies, hiding the blood bond between Eva and Kat, masking the gnawing guilt that haunted her every night. When Eva stumbled across strange papers while reorganizing files, her heart began to race with suspicion and utter confusion. The odd coincidence of birth dates, Leslie's scrawled handwriting, unsent letters, all of it led Eva to the threshold of a shock she had never known. Her anger at Kat's trap faded into insignificance, for she realized the true deceiver was the mother she both loved and resented, and her fellow victim was none other than Kat herself. Confronted with the truth, Eva felt both numb and shattered. Her entire past was upended. All reasons to hate Kat became meaningless, for it was Leslie, the woman who had taught her honesty and courage, who had sown all the tragedy and division. For Kat, the blow was a savage wound to her proudest sense of self. She had spent her youth building her position, fighting Eva at all costs, trying to prove herself and seize everything she thought she deserved, only to have the world revealed as a cruel joke of fate and lies. The feeling of betrayal came not just from Eva but from every adult she had ever trusted or called family. Kat, always so strong and reckless, found herself more vulnerable than ever in the face of this truth about her blood and her stolen identity. The pain did not burst out in screams but flowed silently in tears, in empty eyes, in every breath as she isolated herself in a dark room, unable to trust anything anymore. Leslie, who had woven the shroud over these two lives, now faced the consequences of her old machinations with a weary, guilty, and fearful heart. Even after trying to maintain her icy shell, she could not stop trembling when Eva stood before her, eyes full of both anger and sorrow. Leslie knew that any justification was now pointless, that the past would never forgive her, that all her efforts to build happiness with lies had led only to a bottomless pit of loss and regret. She saw, in Kat's eyes and Eva's silent grief, a reflection of herself, a mother beyond redemption, a woman who lost everything by trying to control the destinies of others. The biggest question now fell to Ted. When all clues pointed to a painful swap in the past, when bloodlines that could never truly be exchanged were placed upon two children with utterly divergent fates, Ted became the one holding the most fragile scales of justice. Within him raged a war, between his duty to protect Eva, the one he'd always regarded as flesh and blood, his compassion for Kat, whom he'd once considered an adversary, and his anger toward Leslie, who had ruined everything. Ted weighed every possibility, asking himself what was right. Should he keep this secret to protect the two girls from a storm of scandal, or confront Leslie directly and force her to pay for all she'd done? Each day was a nightmare as Ted watched Eva and Kat from afar, feeling the icy distance widening between two people he once believed embodied two opposing worlds. In countless sleepless nights, Ted reconsidered again and again, ultimately realizing that hiding the truth would only perpetuate Leslie's cycle, adding another lie to a wound that would never heal. Yet he also knew that facing Leslie was not just about punishment but about finding answers for all the pain, all the tragedy that Eva and Kat had suffered because of one selfish decision in the past. When Ted finally sought out Leslie, all restraint was gone. In the cold room, with the clock ticking remorselessly, Ted did not ask her why she did it. He knew all excuses were meaningless. He simply gazed at the woman who had traded her youth, her honor, and her family for a wild dream of power, of controlling the fates of others. Ted needed no words. His look alone was enough to make Leslie step back, enough for her to understand the inescapable fate awaiting all those who try to outmaneuver the truth. From that moment, everything changed. Eva and Kat, even if they could not reconcile in a single night, could no longer remain the adversaries they once were. Each began to see herself in the shattered mirror of the past, questioning what was real, what was false, and who they truly were. They could not easily forgive Leslie, nor instantly forgive each other, but from that deepest pain, they began to contemplate sharing, compassion, and the loneliness of a stolen childhood. There would be many more battles, falls, and lonely nights before hearts could open again. But at least, with the shock of the truth, all masks had fallen, every veil had been torn, and a new chapter in Eva and Kat's lives began, where two fates, once switched, must now decide whether to go to the end of hatred or dare to move beyond it to find a real family. Deep inside, Leslie lived with the fear of punishment, of being forgotten, of losing everything. But everything she tried to hide only deepened the wounds of those she loved most. And Ted, the only one brave enough to face the truth, understood that all good things begin with the courage to look straight into the darkness. And at the farthest edge of pain, the faint first glimmer of forgiveness also began to glow, waiting for a day bright enough to shine on the lives of all those who survived that long-ago storm of lies.